What if I told you that some of the strongest communities in the world were once the most divided? Places where neighbors avoided eye contact. Where different races lived side by side, but never together. Where fear quietly replaced trust. In these places, diversity wasn't seen as a strength. It was seen as a threat. People believed differences in skin color, language, or culture would eventually tear everything apart. But something unexpected happened. Not a miracle. Not a sudden change of heart. Just ordinary people. Facing extraordinary moments. Moments that forced them to choose between hate and understanding. Between division and unity. And when they chose unity, everything changed. Today, you're about to hear 5 powerful, real-life inspired stories that prove one simple truth. Diversity doesn't destroy communities. It rebuilds them, stronger than ever. In today's world, few topics create as much tension as race and diversity. Turn on the news, scroll through social media, or listen to political debates, and you'll hear the same arguments again and again. Some people claim diversity causes conflict. Others say it weakens national identity. Many believe that people from different backgrounds can never truly understand each other. And because of these beliefs, racism often hides behind words like culture, tradition, or security. But here's what most people don't realize. Racism isn't always loud. It doesn't always come in the form of hate crimes or open insults. More often, it lives quietly in everyday life. In neighborhoods where people never speak. In classrooms where students sit in invisible racial groups. In workplaces where certain voices are ignored. In communities where fear is passed down from one generation to the next. History shows us that separation has always been easier than understanding. It's easier to stay with people who look like you. Who speak like you. Who live like you. But easy doesn't mean right. And it certainly doesn't mean strong. The strongest communities in history were not built on sameness. They were built on cooperation. From ancient trade cities to modern global economies, progress has always depended on people learning to live and work together. Yet even today, many societies struggle with this basic truth. Why? Because diversity challenges comfort. It forces people to confront their assumptions, their stereotypes, their fears. And fear, when left unchallenged, turns into prejudice. But when fear is confronted, something powerful happens. People start asking questions instead of making assumptions. They start listening instead of judging. They start seeing individuals instead of labels. That's when unity begins. In this video, you'll hear 5 deeply human stories. Stories where communities stood at a crossroads. One path led to deeper division. The other led to understanding. None of these stories began with harmony. They began with tension, mistrust, and sometimes open racism. But each one proves the same thing. When diversity is embraced, not ignored, it becomes a force stronger than fear. Let's begin with the first story. In a small American town, 2 neighborhoods existed side by side. One was made up mostly of white families who had lived there for generations. The other was home to immigrant families, people who spoke different languages, cooked different food, and practiced different traditions. They shared the same streets, the same grocery stores, the same schools. But they lived in completely different worlds. There were no greetings in the morning, no smiles, no conversations. Parents warned their children to stay on their side. Rumors spread quietly. Fear grew silently. Nothing dramatic ever happened, but the tension was always there. Then one night, everything changed. A powerful storm hit the town without warning. Heavy rain flooded homes. Electricity went out. Cars were damaged. Families were stranded. Emergency services were overwhelmed. And for the first time, people had no choice but to rely on each other. A man from the older neighborhood knocked on a stranger's door, an immigrant family he had never spoken to before. Not to argue. Not to complain. But to ask for help. Together, they moved furniture to higher ground. They shared flashlights. They checked on elderly neighbors. As the hours passed, something unexpected happened. People began talking. Not about race. Not about politics. But about their children. their jobs, their fears. A woman realized the family she had avoided for years was just as worried about safety as she was. A teenage boy discovered his enemy loved the same music he did. When the storm passed, the damage was still there. But the fear was gone. In the days that followed, neighbors helped rebuild homes, regardless of background. Barriers that had stood for years collapsed in a single night. What racism had built slowly, human connection destroyed quickly. That neighborhood never went back to silence again. At a public middle school, diversity was everywhere, but unity was not. Students naturally separated themselves. Lunch tables divided by race. Group projects avoided across cultural lines. Teachers noticed it. Administrators worried about it. But no one knew how to fix it. Until one teacher decided to try something risky. She introduced a long-term group project and assigned the groups herself. Each group included students from different racial and cultural backgrounds. The reaction was immediate. Complaints, frustration, anger. Some students refused to speak to each other. Others openly challenged the assignment. Stereotypes surfaced quickly. This won't work. They don't understand us. They are lazy. They are difficult. The first week was chaos. But the teacher didn't step in. She let them struggle. Slowly, necessity forced communication. Someone had to research. Someone had to present. Someone had to lead. And when one student struggled, another stepped in, not because of friendship, but because the project depended on it. Weeks passed. Something changed. Arguments turned into discussions. Silence turned into laughter. Students learned about each other's families, their cultures, their struggles. One student admitted he had never spoken to someone from another race before. Another shared how stereotypes had followed her entire life. By the end of the semester, test scores improved. But more importantly, friendships formed. Students who once avoided each other now defended one another. That classroom didn't just complete a project. It rewired how young minds saw race. And those lessons lasted far beyond school walls. At a mid-sized company in a growing city, tension was rising fast. Employees came from different racial and cultural backgrounds, but inclusion existed only on paper. Meetings were uncomfortable. Ideas from certain employees were ignored. Promotions felt unfair. Whispers of discrimination spread through hallways. Productivity dropped. Resignations increased. Management blamed cultural differences. But employees knew the truth. Racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it quietly decides who is heard and who is invisible. Facing collapse, leadership made a bold decision. They brought in diversity training, not as a formality, but as a requirement. Employees were asked to share personal experiences. Not opinions. Not arguments. Real stories. One man spoke about being constantly mistaken for someone else. A woman described being overlooked despite years of experience. Another admitted he never realized his silence supported unfairness. At first, the room was tense. Then it became honest. Walls broke down. People didn't agree on everything, but they finally understood each other. In the months that followed, collaboration improved. Innovation increased. Trust slowly returned. The company didn't just survive. It evolved. A local football team had talent, but no unity. Players came from different racial backgrounds. They blamed losses on each other. Resentment grew after every defeat. Racial jokes were disguised as locker room humor. Silence protected bad behavior. Then came a new coach. Instead of focusing on tactics, he focused on truth. He sat the team down and asked one question. Why don't you trust each other? At first, no one spoke. Then one player broke the silence. He talked about being judged before ever touching the ball. Another admitted he carried stereotypes he had never questioned. The conversation was uncomfortable. Emotions ran high. But it was real. The coach forced them to train together, not just physically, but mentally. They shared meals. They shared stories. Slowly, respect replaced resentment. That season, they didn't just start winning games. They started protecting each other. Unity turned individuals into a team. After a series of racial incidents, a city felt divided beyond repair. Protests filled the streets. Anger dominated conversations. Fear ruled daily life. City leaders tried policies. They failed. Then a simple idea emerged. A multicultural festival. Food stalls from different cultures. Music from every corner of the world. Storytelling spaces for real voices. People came cautiously. But curiosity replaced fear. A man tasted food he had never tried before. A child danced to music she had never heard. Strangers talked. Laughed. Connected. That night didn't erase racism. But it reminded people of something important. They shared humanity. And sometimes, that's enough to begin healing. If there is one thing these stories all have in common, it's this. Racism survives on distance. It grows when people don't talk. When they don't listen. When they don't see each other as human beings. In every story you just heard, fear existed first. Fear of the unknown. Fear of being judged. Fear of losing control. That fear didn't disappear because of speeches. Or laws. Or social media arguments. It disappeared when people were forced to face each other, not as labels, but as lives. A neighbor wasn't an immigrant. He was a father trying to protect his family from a storm. A classmate wasn't a stereotype. She was a student carrying the weight of being misunderstood every single day. A coworker wasn't too different. He was someone whose voice had been ignored for far too long. And once people truly saw each other, racism began to lose its grip. That's the uncomfortable truth many don't want to admit. Racism isn't just taught. It's maintained by silence. By walking past instead of speaking up. By looking away instead of listening. By choosing comfort over courage. But courage doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes, it's just knocking on a door you've avoided for years. Sometimes, it's sitting at a table that feels unfamiliar. Sometimes, it's admitting you were wrong. Unity isn't built in one moment. It's built in thousands of small choices. Choices to listen. Choices to learn. Choices to stand beside someone, even when it's uncomfortable. And when those choices are made, something powerful happens. Communities don't just heal. They grow stronger than they ever were before. Diversity doesn't erase identity. It gives it meaning. Because strength doesn't come from being the same. It comes from standing together, despite our differences. The next time someone tells you that diversity divides us, remember these stories. Remember the neighborhood that found unity in disaster. The classroom that reshaped young minds. The workplace that learned to listen. The team that chose trust over resentment. The city that began healing through culture and connection. Racism wants you to believe separation is natural. But history proves otherwise. Progress has always been built by people who chose understanding over fear. You don't have to change the world overnight. You don't have to fix everything. But you can change something. You can speak when silence feels easier. You can listen when judgment feels faster. You can choose unity, even when it's uncomfortable. Because every strong community started with someone brave enough to say, "We can do better." And maybe, just maybe, the strongest version of your community is waiting on the other side of understanding.